Hello everyone and welcome to the third event in the HSBC Think Bigger Innovation Series. My name is Ray Johnston. I'm a STEM journalist and broadcaster and your host for today's session. As a Wiradjuri woman who was born and raised on Darug and Gundungurra country, I am honoured to be here with you today on the unceded land of the Gadigal, and I pay my deepest respects to their elders, past and present. I extend that respect to any of my First Nations brothers and sisters, aunties and uncles that are joining us today. And I ask that you too acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land that you're on. So when we say big data, what do we mean? Big data is data coming from more places, faster, volume, variety and velocity. Put simply, big data is larger, more complex data sets, especially from new data sources. These data sets are so voluminous that traditional data processing software just can't manage them. But these massive volumes of data can be used to address business problems you wouldn't have been able to tackle before. So in 2020, 1.7 megabytes of data was created every second by every person, and this will only get bigger. Machine-generated data is also increasing at a rapid rate and made up 40% of internet data created last year. Across industries, organisations are realising the power of big data and analytics to innovate and drive business growth. This is something I've had a lot of experience exploring through one of my podcasts where I speak to CEOs and C-suite executives about how they're leveraging the move to remote work and the data that's creating for the future of their industry. Data provides organisations with a deeper understanding of its customers, the environment in which they operate, and areas of operational efficiency. As consumers ask for more transparency on how their data is used by banks and other organisations, what strategies do companies have in place to use data-driven innovation? Joining me to discuss this today is Trent Innes, Managing Director, Australia and Asia at Xero. Hi, Trent.
Hi, thank you so much for having me on the show.
Malika Sathi, Vice President and Head of Cyber and Intelligence at Mastercard.
Good afternoon, everyone. Great to be here.
And John Doman, Chief Information Officer at HSBC Australia.
Hi, Ray. Hi, everybody.
Thank you all for joining me today. I'd love for you to start by telling me a little bit about yourself and your organisation. I'll start with you, Trent.
So thank you so much. First of all, Trent Innes, the Managing Director of Xero here in Australia and Asia. So Xero is a cloud-based accounting platform for small and medium business, and we've got customers all around the world. In fact, in 180 countries now, and business is actually going really, really well.
Wonderful. And how about yourself, Malika?
Thanks, Ray. My name is Malika Sathi. I look after the cyber and intelligence business at Mastercard. And what we do is help banks and businesses and governments, use data to predict and detect and prevent fraud and cyber attacks.
And what about you, John?
Hi, Ray. Hi, everybody. So obviously, I'm the CIO of HSBC Bank Australia. Hopefully, I don't have to introduce the organisation to everybody. I'm responsible and accountable for technology, delivering obviously the services to our customers, both internal and external, and protecting that important data that we hold.
Now, John, I would love to understand the biggest benefit that data brings to your role in supporting customers.
Sure. Look, I could cover many use cases where we're providing data capabilities for our businesses. But for me personally, cyber's my highest priority, protecting data, protecting the bank. We use big data in quite an amazing way in our cyber analytics and threat protection, prevention and protection capabilities. And we've seen many really great proactive cases whereby we've been able to help protect our customers by using that data. So to me, that is the greatest use at this point in time.
And Malika, what is the biggest benefit that data brings to your role?
Sure. So in our business, some of the things that we're thinking about are all the connected devices and the proliferation of these devices. There's going to be 50 billion of them in the next couple of years.
Wow.
And then on top of that, we have 5G coming to our shores. So that's going to see an absolute explosion of data. So, what we think about in our business is how can we use that to make sure that we can enhance customer experiences, reduce friction, to predict fraud better and prevent those sorts of issues, and prevent fraud in our customers' businesses. One example I wanted to share, which is top of mind, is as businesses have navigated through this very challenging period in the last 12 months during the pandemic. We can use data to look at signs of financial distress and financial hardship. And for me, that's been really rewarding to identify and help banks understand that information, 60 to 80 days before the event, the delinquency event actually happens, so that banks can reach out to those customers and offer support and come up with strategies to manage the hardship that they might be facing.
Yeah, it's interesting to see the humanity that can be pulled out of something that just seems so technical and removed from humans.
That's right.
Interesting. And how about you, Trent?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think one of the probably things we're most proud of during the pandemic was a program that we have called Zero Small Business Insights. And what that is an aggregated anonymous view of all the subscribers on our platform. So to give you an example, it's over 1 million small business subscribers on the platform here in Australia. And when the pandemic hit, historically, there's actually not a lot known about small business at scale. And it gave us some amazing insights into the true impact it was actually having at a consolidated level. So we're able to see things, the impact from a revenue perspective, the impact on employment, but even right down to sort of granular levels of what's happening in employment, like full-time, part-time, casual, which locations were harder hit, which industries were harder hit. And it gave us some really interesting insights that we're able to actually help shape the way that we can actually run programs and then go back out to our customers with information that can best help them navigate their way through the pandemic. One of the other really interesting things I think we were able to do, which is probably I don't think has really ever been done before, was our ability to look across countries and see what impact it had. So, we were looking across some of our major markets, such as Australia, New Zealand, and the UK, and actually comparing it. And what was quite fascinating is that each government was dealing with the pandemic in slightly different ways. And so, for example, New Zealand locked down much harder, much quicker, and much deeper. So the impact to revenue in the short term was much more profound to the small business economy, whereas Australia tended to do it was a bit softer in its approach in the early days, and so the impact straight away wasn't as great, but over time it actually almost equaled itself out. So it was a fascinating way for us to actually look across regions and really compare what's going on in these major economies.
Yeah, and Trent, your response to JobKeeper product updates to accommodate wage subsidy schemes, that was a great example of how Xero has used data innovation to support its customers in the last 12 months. Could you tell us how you approach this kind of development?
Yeah, thank you. I was really proud of the team and the way they actually pivoted to help our customers during this time. So as you can imagine, the small business economy was hit far harder than big business was. And JobKeeper was very much aimed at how do you keep people in employment. But when you're a small business trying to understand what does this mean to me, how do I apply for this, am I even eligible for this? We really wanted to help them with that. So we built an eligibility test right into the actual product itself. So a small business owner could tell straight away if they were eligible for JobKeeper or not. And then more importantly, actually make it really easy for them to access that stimulus as well. So within our payroll product, we actually built the ability for them to actually claim JobKeeper straight within the product if they were eligible for it. So really trying to take that manual guesswork out of their day-to-day life and make it as easy as we possibly could for them.
Fantastic. Now, Malika, Mastercard has visibility of 75 billion transactions every year. I've got that right. That's not a number that's been made up. 75 billion.
Yes, that's right.
Can you explain how this payment data, which must be huge, is processed and organised so that your team can draw the best insights from it?
Yeah, sure. Happy to cover that. One of the things that we mentioned earlier was this immense growth in the data. So there's going to be 100 times more data because of this proliferation of devices and consumers just getting more comfortable with transacting online. And we've seen that in the last 12 months over the pandemic. All of us shopped online. So the traditional mechanisms used to store and collect and process data is just no longer going to work. So at Mastercard, we've been thinking about ways to draw the insights, the intelligence from the data. So the process that we go through is sort of understanding the raw data in its raw form, verifying that, enriching it with other sources, other data sources at times, preparing the data. So it's about cleaning up that data, picking the components that are meaningful, augmenting that data, and aggregating it and anonymizing it. This is really, really important to make sure that privacy considerations are taken into account. So when we have that aggregate level of data, then we extract some insights and intelligence. And it's the insights that we want to store and use for various market and business decisions and to find trends. So essentially, we want to make sure that all of this intelligence is warehoused and easily accessible, stored, of course, with the highest grade of security that is of critical importance, and using that in a very ethical, using that data in an ethical manner.
And John, HSBC serves more than 40 million customers across the globe, which gives it access to a huge amount of customer data. And like many large organisations, that data is stored in various data centres in different formats, which can make it difficult to use. So what strategies are you using to make sure that data can be used more effectively?
Thanks, Ray. It's a good question. Look, we've got about 7,000 applications globally. Obviously, a lot of legacy systems. It is a huge challenge for any organisation to tackle this. Fortunately, we've been able to adopt a fairly robust global approach. And I'll talk about two areas. So first about using the data and getting the data into a usable format. So we've built a reference architecture for our data. So we've basically made sure that any data that we're going to consume from a big data perspective is aligned to a reference architecture. So that means that any data source is only moved to cloud once and used many times. So that brings you consistency of usage between your financial reporting, your reg reporting, and the MI reporting. And it also means that you have better management control of the data. And then I guess from another perspective, the ways that you use that data also, we've experimented over many years, looked at machine learning, and we've had many different proof of concepts and implementations of machine learning. And actually the last 12, 18 months, what we've managed to do is work with one of our large cloud partners, Google, to focus on as much as possible a single machine learning workbench. So that means that all the IP you put into creating machine learning can actually be reused as well. Because as you know, once you start doing machine learning, a lot of it is quite specific to the subject. But once you get more consistent data sources, then the reuse becomes a much higher. So those are the sort of strategies we've had in place to make sure that it's secure, it's consistent, and it's available.
Just build some big supercomputers. Trent, how does Xero's cloud-based accounting software put customers' data into their hands to help inform and manage their business finances?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. If you think back historically around small business, there was a certain portion that were running desktop applications around accounting, but there was a large portion that were actually using spreadsheets and pen and paper, and still a large segment of especially the sole trader segment of the economy still does that to today. One of the great examples I like to use is bank feed information. So small businesses would have their information coming through, maybe through their banking software, and they've got their accounting software. And these two were actually separated away from each other. There was actually a level of friction that existed between those two pools of information. One of the great things we know, and HSBC is a great example of this, we have millions of transactions now that come down through bank feeds and find their way into the accounting records. Why that's so important is it gives a small business owner real-time insight to what's actually happening in their business. So they don't have to wait now to the end of the month or the end of the quarter, or even worse than that, to actually find out their actual financial position. So they can actually then make really clear, important decisions. And that became really super important during the pandemic. So we touched on JobKeeper before, but to actually apply for JobKeeper, they had to have up-to-date information. And so the cloud actually allowed them to do that because we actually had all that data coming across into their systems in real time.
Makes sense. Malika, how does Mastercard use artificial intelligence, and how does that benefit Mastercard and also customers?
Sure. So there are a number of ways. There's 3 or 4 ways that I can think of that Mastercard leverages AI ourselves, but for the benefit of our customers. So the first one that comes to mind is customer insights. So helping, using that data to actually target. So better targeting, understanding consumer preferences, buying behaviors, even understanding churn. You want to make sure we understand attrition rate. So managing that customer during their life cycle better. And the second area I can think of is frictionless onboarding. So now that a lot of consumers are using digital channels to create new accounts, we want to make sure the data that we're able to harness from the device itself can be used intelligently to remove any points of friction and make it easier for them to create new accounts. So it makes acquisition easier. Every business wants to think about that. The third area, very close to my heart, is of course risk management. So and fraud detection and prevention. Mastercard has had AI embedded very much in our risk scoring and our risk decisioning products for several years now. We've in fact saved close to $20 billion in fraud. So we've prevented fraud just through the use of some of the AI-enabled systems that we're able to make available to our customers. They leverage the insights that we're able to provide through the global network that we have and the data that we gather in helping prevent and mitigate those fraud events. And then finally, operational efficiency. Lots of businesses are thinking about where is their opportunity for reducing cost. And one area is that a number of businesses are focused on is the compliance aspect of it. So if we can use AI in identifying those patterns more intelligently so that compliance experts can focus on the remediation strategies and fixing those issues, that's where AI can really make a difference to businesses.
I'll stay with you just for a moment, because an important part of what makes data valuable is when it is captured in real time. And I'd love for you to talk me through why real-time information is so important to companies like Mastercard when you are detecting fraud and informing business decisions.
Sure. So, if you think about your own sort of experience when you're buying something online, or you're at a store. So, imagine you're on, when we're eventually able to travel, when you present your card at a hotel to pay your hotel bill, and the card's either blocked or it's been cancelled because the bank thought that it was a fraudulent transaction. That's a sticky situation. We want to avoid those sorts of situations. So we use the data in the network to provide, within a matter of milliseconds, we need to be able to facilitate the exchange of data between that hotel or that online retailer and the bank, and exchange pieces of information that allows the bank to make that decision to approve the transaction. And that needs to happen in real time. The bank then is equipped with the intelligence to be able to either approve it straight away, so you can walk away with your goods, or to ask for more information. In some instances, the consumer might be asked to provide, they get a SMS and provide some additional information so that they can verify that they are a genuine user. Or in some cases, the bank might decline that transaction altogether. But the response time in milliseconds is very critical in our business, which requires transaction processing and needs to be instantaneous.
Leading on from that, John, with COVID-19, the instances of cyber risk has increased exponentially. Yes. What measures are HSBC taking to protect the banks and its clients' data from that risk?
Oh, look, Ray, I think at any time the bank's exposed and everybody's exposed to cyber risk, it's our constant focus, right? As Malika said, a lot around the fraud detection and that. I think that's probably one of our key areas that we've helped the businesses focus and implement some technology changes there. But certainly around the threat intelligence and the monitoring that we do. So we actually do proactive monitoring outside the perimeter of the bank, especially where we've got suppliers, key suppliers, and actually all suppliers, and also between our clients when they're communicating with us. So we monitor that, and actually we've had quite a few instances where we've monitored that and we've found some unusual behaviour, and we've proactively helped a client prevent a cyber attack. So those are the sort of things that we're doing, and it's with these data capabilities that we've invested in and continue to invest in that give us the ability to help protect the customer's data.
Nice. Trent, data privacy has been a headline issue in recent years with tech giants like Facebook and Google and Amazon. They've all been challenged to change how their data is commercialised for marketing purposes. How important is data privacy today, and what should our Australian audience understand about this?
So look, it's absolutely super important. It really comes back to the foundation of trust. And I think, as a society, even if you take data out of it, we actually, we have a right to privacy, and I think that's part of the foundation of our overall society. I think one of the biggest challenges around data privacy, though, is if you look at the great panel that we're on today, inherently we have quite high levels of knowledge and understanding around data and how it might be used. Unfortunately, that's not the case for the average consumer. I think the average consumer out there still is quite naive about how their data may be used and what they're actually consenting to. And so there is a large amount of education, I think, that still needs to go on. And often we quite say the biggest risk around data breaches is the person sitting in front of the keyboard. They're the ones that are actually most likely to actually give away a password, give away some key pieces of information that actually can obviously lead to their privacy being compromised. So it is really important. And obviously the governments around the world are catching up in this space, and they're starting to legislate where appropriate. And obviously got the Data Privacy Act in place. We're also heading now down the next path, and I'm sure our banking colleagues here could talk a bit more about this than I could. But the areas of open banking, and more importantly, more broadly, the consumer data right, which really aims to put the consumer in complete charge of their actual data, and that'll be obviously a journey. And I think once again, the average consumer out there won't understand it, but fundamentally, it all comes back to that level of trust. And I think unfortunately at this stage, there's still a lot of education to go on around that space to really help protect the average consumer out there.
Yeah, I think we're really combating that, I've got nothing to hide, it doesn't really bother me sort of attitude that we see is so pervasive. So I would like to know from you, though, do you consider storing data a cost or an investment?
It's absolutely an investment. From our perspective, it's absolutely an investment. But it's not only an investment for us, it's actually an investment for our customers, because we can actually help them run a much more efficient business and actually give them far better insights than they've ever had before. So it's absolutely, there's no doubt in my mind that it's an investment.
Perfect. So, Malika, can you explain how Mastercard is leveraging big data to empower business to forecast and define their strategies, like the Mastercard Business Analytics platform, for example?
Okay, sure. So one of the sort of recent announcements, in fact, just yesterday, we announced a partnership with the Australian Retail Association to look at how we can help businesses, get out of this this challenging period and back to economic recovery. So we think that we have a lot of data that we can use to power that and to give, share insights, spending behavior, understanding, which particular areas are contracting, which are the areas that are expanding, what are the specific, are there regions where the consumers are spending more? Are there specific segments of the population where the spend is a lot healthier than others? Are there certain days of the week or days of the month that where spending does peak? So these are really good market insights and the intelligence, and we can provide these sorts of data points and payment trends that we're seeing as a payments organization, based on the national retail sales data. So we look at not just the card payment spend, but we overlay that with other payment methods as well, and turn this into a report that retailers can use to make their investment decisions and refine their business strategies.
Now, John, historically the IT department in any business really, but also in a bank, it was hidden out in the back office. But as banks are increasingly viewed as technology providers, particularly in the payment space, with this shift, have you seen your role evolve? Have they let you out of the basement?
Oh, absolutely. No, we're at the front of the office now. Look, we don't see ourselves as much as providers, as partners with the business. We're really enabling, look, I love how with some of the new capabilities we've got, and especially in the data space, we've got citizen coders there who are business SMEs. They know their products. Once they learn data science and analytics capabilities, they're really getting to know how their products work, what they want to see from the data, and they can build most of it themselves. And if it's too hard, they can come and ask us and we can help them finish it off. So we've really moved to it being a constant dialogue with the business. They're always looking for us for direction. We've got this idea, how can we solve this? And that partnership works both ways. In terms of the payment space and actually providing some services, yes, we do have some markets where we're running services that are for the entire industry or the sector. And look, I think with the whole change of fintechs and banks, it's only going to evolve further, right? So I think there's some great opportunities out there for the fintechs and for the banks to do both.
Fantastic. Now, Trent, what example do you think shows the most innovative response to the pandemic?
I think there's been so many of them, hasn't there? I mean, just the use of data to help us manage through the pandemic. I quite often say, can you imagine if we had had a pandemic, 15, 20 years ago, when a lot of these tools weren't just available for us to actually work the way we have during the pandemic. But the one thing that's probably fascinated me the most has been contact tracing. I think once we really worked out how to do that, the ability to actually, trace COVID cases and have that information so readily available, it's quite fascinating to me. And I have to admit, I've been quite drawn to watching that play out.
Yeah, I've been fascinated by QR codes and how they're being utilised now. They used to be a kind of strange way to have a business card if you were particularly technically minded, and now they're kind of the backbone of how we function. It's really interesting.
Yeah, it's been fascinating, hasn't it? I mean, Australia has not really adopted QR codes, previously. Yet, I said before, I look after Australia and Asia, and I spend quite a bit of time up in Asia. QR codes have been quite prevalent throughout Asia for some time, but we've really embraced them now, and I probably can't see those going away for a while.
Malika, are there any Mastercard data resources that are available to our listeners or viewers today that you can recommend?
Yeah, sure. There are loads. We're constantly collaborating with the industry, collaborating with universities around the world. We've got a centre of excellence in the cybersecurity space. So we're constantly looking at what's next and we publish a lot of white papers just to stimulate some, thought leadership and dialogue on what's on the next horizon. A lot of these papers and these resources are published on our website, on the Mastercard website. We also have a number of assets that leverage the data that we see in the network through Mastercard services. So it's again another website that you can have a look at, which gives you a good view of all the various tools that we have on offer.
Now, John, what are some of the learnings that you can share working with other countries across the HSBC group?
Ray, look, I'm pretty lucky. I've worked in regional and global roles for most of my career, and look, some of the innovation that happens, even in some of the smaller markets that we have across Asia, is quite astounding. How the business have been able to work with local suppliers or fintechs or even their clients to deliver solutions that you would never have dreamt of before, particularly around the payment space, around inventory systems, and you name it. So I think that the key part that I found was how we share the information and how we collaborate and make things reusable. So I think with the current capabilities we have with a lot of the offerings, Teams and Confluence and all these great collaboration tools, I think you can't use them enough. And I think getting your organization to actually start to really use these tools and open it up, and also go back to the old show and tell type scenarios. There's so many times where we've done those sort of exercises and we've got so much follow-up, and next thing you know, the business in another country wants to do the same thing. Well, it's great, we've already done it. So I think that whole collaboration piece, and I think COVID's really exacerbated the need for digital collaboration because people were so used to only communicating within the walls they're in. So it's certainly changed things.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of collaboration happening not only within companies and industries, but also across industries as well, and the learnings that we're taking from each other. So it's definitely important. I'd love to know from all of you, actually. I'm going to be cheeky and ask what your next big tech investment is for this year. We'll start with you, Trent.
I was very mindful not to give too much away, of course.
I am a journalist.
I've got to be a little bit careful. But I think one of the things that really shone through is probably during the pandemic is actually the acceleration of a lot of the trends we were already seeing. So, you can't not be digital. You have to be online in some form of capacity. And those that, unfortunately, the pandemic weren't in that scenario had to accelerate. So it's how do we help our customers, be as digital as they can be and as quickly as they possibly can be. One classic example of that is using machine learning, and accounting lends itself very much to machine learning. So we've got a program underway called Code-Free Accounting, and the whole idea behind that is that as transactions are hitting zero, what can we actually learn from what's been done previously and code that information as quickly as possible so that then small business owners can get much better real-time information coming to them. And so that was a real learning experience for us to actually see how we can best utilize that to give that information to our customers.
How about you, John? What's your next big tech investment for this year?
Look, I was going to say the new iPhone, but no, I think I'm talking on behalf of the company. Look, data is where we're going, and building digital capabilities around that data. So we're certainly seeing the transformation of banking as an industry, bricks and mortar. It was certainly a challenge during COVID to keep them open and safe. So a lot of customers are starting to move. And I don't think Australia has been historically a highly digitized banking and finance industry, but certainly we see the acceleration through COVID, and that aligns to the strategy we're going to execute. So yeah, that's where we're going.
Fantastic. And Malika, how about yourself? What can you tell me?
Sure. So I'm going to, and the business is going to invest in building out digital identity. So let me tell you a little bit more about that. So if you think about what we went through in the last 12 months, and during the last sort of 40 minutes, we've talked about the increase in the digital interactions. So consumers are going to, they're going to habituate. So they've gotten used to the convenience of buying things online. And a lot of consumers are not going to go back to the in-store experience now that they've discovered shopping online. So what we want to do is implement a digital identity capability which allows consumers to more easily create those accounts online, verify themselves when they're setting up those accounts online. And once that's done, reuse that identity credential in lots of other places. So if you think about, I think one of the images that's stuck in my mind is the very long queues outside Centrelink during the pandemic. Now, had we had a digital identity solution that consumers could use to verify themselves, they might have been able to claim those government subsidies online. And all the various other digital interactions. I could have created a bank account online if I didn't have one, and verified and completed my KYC and the regulatory aspects of it online. So this is an area we believe is going to grow rapidly, and we think there is immense opportunity in creating that digital identity. And very much what Trent was saying earlier, it puts the control of consumer data very much in the hands of the consumer. So they create that identity, they hold on to the identity, they share aspects and attributes that are relevant to that particular, the particular interaction. So if I'm buying an airline ticket, I only share my passport details and expiry. If I'm buying a phone, I provide the details required for that specific purchase, and nothing more. So I really feel like this is an area that is going to become very important in the not too distant future, and that's where we're investing our energy.
Absolutely. It is now time for the Q&A portion of our event. So if you haven't already, be sure to send your questions on through. I believe our first question here is for Malika again. Can you discuss the ethical considerations of AI? Can we have a whole new hour panel, please? That's a big one.
Yes, that's absolutely, and Mastercard is very serious about that. We want to make sure that any AI models that we create and the data, the use of the data is transparent. We're very much we believe very strongly in the consent-driven and the privacy-centric use of data, consumer data. We believe that the consumer owns that data, so they have the right to communicate their preference, about holding the data or deleting the data, and that's where the regulations are heading around the world. The AI models that we build, we want to make sure that we limit bias wherever possible. We want to make sure it's fair, that it's open, so that it's not this black box that some solutions are. So there is a degree of openness, and I think that will give consumers a lot more trust in the businesses that they're dealing with that use AI.
I've got another question here. Agree, data privacy is important. How can I factor this into my business plans? Trent, this sounds like one for you.
I think a lot of it comes down to education. Obviously, I touched on this a little bit earlier, but it's about understanding what data privacy truly means. And of course, you can read the acts and you can see everything that's government's doing, but I still think it comes fundamentally down to trust. And there's an expectation, or there should be an expectation from the consumer, that the information they share or the data they share is actually being used for the purpose it was intended for in the very beginning. And so I think if you take that very customer-centric view around data privacy and the way that you use data, that should lead you in the right direction. I also believe as well that the consumer should be in charge of their data. That's absolutely at the forefront of the way we think about things. I think if you go down that route, then you should be on the right direction.
Fantastic. I've got another question here. They're coming in. Keep them coming. How does the move to remote working impact cybersecurity and how companies manage data? Who wants to take this one? John?
I'm happy to.
Okay, yeah.
I'm happy to share some thoughts, and then I'll
Absolutely.
hand over to John. So yes, absolutely. That is a hot topic, and our security team is continually, I think, to Trent's point about education. It's about continually, educating our workforce on, not clicking on links, not sharing any details. If somebody unknown to you calls you on the phone and asks, even if they say they are from a reliable organization, just being, very vigilant about who you're sharing your personal information with. Not putting personal information on websites where you can avoid it. Definitely not putting payment information or sharing payment information either through email or, if somebody contacts you. So I think it's just being aware and vigilant and making sure that simple things like passwords, protect that sensitive information. Don't leave it out in the open. Don't leave it where it can be hacked. I think that some of those simple measures will help protect our workforce.
Yep. Oh, and look, for us, we've had a work from home policy. We've had flexible working for, quite a long time, 15, 20 years, as far as I can recall. And I guess the mass working from home did change some people's roles because their role was within the security of our own buildings. So obviously we went and assessed each of those individual roles and looked at if we needed to put additional controls around those people who are used to working in the office. And I think it's also about training people beyond cyber, also be situationally aware. So you don't have people doing sensitive work at a coffee shop. So they're supposed to work in a as secure location as possible.
Not on public Wi-Fi.
Absolutely, absolutely. So it's all got to be encrypted end to end. So obviously we invested a lot in VPN and also having more resilient capabilities, video conferencing. We've moved our game up in terms of our video conferencing capabilities, and that makes it more secure because you're not having people using other technologies that are unapproved. So it's about making sure that they've got the tools to do their job from home, and also even giving people ongoing tips on how they can manage their bandwidth and so forth. But the cybersecurity training and reinforcement continues at probably the same pace it was before COVID and after COVID. That will never change. And I guess we keep improving our analysis of the effectiveness of that training.
Absolutely. I've got another question here. How has the increased use of QR codes in Australia created opportunities for data capture? Who wants to take this one? Trent, you're thinking?
Yeah, I'm definitely thinking about it. I mean, I think I touched on this a little bit earlier that historically QR codes weren't that prevalent in Australia, but it's been a fantastic way for us to quickly identify and get information. I mean, it's I think it's always kind of been of a dream, hasn't it? You could walk into a restaurant or a cafe and flash your phone and it knew who you were and you could actually place an order straight away. But I think it's got much more broader applications than that over time as well. But once again, comes back to, you talked about data privacy before, it's making sure that data is actually used in the right way. And you'll notice sometimes, I notice personally when I go to check into various locations, there's obviously, you're quite often using the government source app, or you might be using a third party one, and the third party one might have some tick boxes down the side of it that allows them to use that information for other purposes. And so I think, even though QR codes are fantastic, I think we still need to be really mindful of making sure that we're actually using it the right way and that people actually fully understand once they actually scan that, what does it mean? Am I inadvertently putting myself on a marketing list now, as an example? I didn't actually mean that to happen. And so I think we've got to be really careful about that as well.
Yeah, and that is happening, definitely. You've got to make sure you're scanning the right QR code there. We've got the next question here, which is for John. How do social media / apps pose a cybersecurity risk to organisations and people?
Oh, absolutely. Look, people's digital footprints exist wherever they step, and a lot of people don't understand how much personal information, directly or indirectly, they're disclosing through these applications. So perpetrators can obviously reveal your digital identity by following you through these apps. They don't have to be working in Facebook to do that. So people need to be conscious of the privacy settings they have set up, who they trust, who they accept invites with. It's actually part of the training that we give to our staff. And it's very important, right? Because once people start to get a hold of your credentials, then look, they can get verified and do things at the bank that you don't want them to be doing. So it's quite important that people read those privacy recommendations from those social media app providers. And I think it's best to probably read it from the Facebooks and the larger players. The smaller players probably won't have as much detail there. Or do some reading for themselves before they start to. And I guess, look, now it's kids are getting phones younger and younger and younger. You've also got to look at that exposure as well, because that could then expose you because they're part of your cluster of friends within social media. So it's getting becoming a more complex problem, but I think everybody needs to understand it more.
I can add a couple of comments to what John says, and I completely agree with John. I think what we're finding in Mastercard is when a data breach does happen, the bad actor is collecting some of that stolen information. So it could be your Medicare details or your personal details. And then social media, they go and collect a lot more information about you. So they have, through various different data sources, they're able to collect information about you to create that synthetic identity. And as John was saying, they can use that information to go and take a loan out in your name. And so the identity theft is becoming a huge problem. And a lot of bad actors are taking over accounts with stolen information that they buy off the dark web. So this is a massive problem that we're looking at, helping our customers with, and social media is a data source to that problem.
And one very simple thing that you can do is make sure that you're not using the same password across all of your social media accounts and your work accounts.
Absolutely.
That's one thing that people often overlook.
Yeah. Things, don't use your pet's name, and don't use. So it's just simple things. Don't use something that can be easily guessed by looking at your social media profile.
We've got another question here. Malika, can you share how Mastercard is working with HSBC to deliver value for customers?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there are a number of areas of collaboration where we partner with HSBC, including the card product itself. There are a number of data and insights tools that I previously mentioned that we make available to HSBC. That helps us then jointly, refine our strategies and positioning, figuring out what products we position to segments that HSBC wants to focus on, but also how do we support HSBC's customer base. So again, one of the areas that I think we could look at is how do we leverage all the AI assets. So how could we look at collaborating on the cybersecurity front? Are there data points that both global organizations, and if bringing those two data sets together will help us mitigate some of the fraud that we're seeing in the ecosystem as digital transactions increase. So I think there's plenty of opportunity for future collaboration over and above what we already do together.
Great. Got one more question here, a couple more questions. Keep them coming, people. John, what countries are used to store Australia's data?
Is that a HSBC question? Okay.
It's a general question. You can answer it as you wish, I believe.
Look, no secret, we're Hong Kong and Shanghai Banking Corporation, so the vast majority of HSBC's Australia's data is stored in Hong Kong, and it's been that way for well over a decade, probably closer to 15 years. And obviously we handle the movement of data very carefully, and I think goes back to the privacy question for Trent before. So with every project we do, we go through privacy impact assessments, and that involves looking at the impact of where that data is going to be, which jurisdiction it's going to, who has access to it, why do they need access, and obviously that's signed off by our legal and compliance departments. And we actually have what we've implemented recently, a product called Data Visa. So all data, wherever it's going to and from, is using the Data Visa concept, which is being globally adopted. So we take the whole data residency very carefully. We obviously operate in a number of markets where the regulator has very clear stipulation on where the data can reside, and we abide by that very closely.
Fantastic. So I've got one here. Do you see blockchain, NFTs, I must say, non-fungible tokens has been on my lips every day for the last few weeks. Do you see them as a threat to traditional clearinghouses, such as card payment providers, and how will your industry adapt?
That sounds like it's one for me.
Sounds like a question for you.
So I think Mastercard's already working with the Ethereum Alliance and a number of other, and we're looking at where we can look at partnerships where we could coexist. I honestly think that just like we have in the current day scenario, we have the card network as well as lots of other domestic payments networks. As well as cash. So cash still exists in lots of markets, including ours. So in a future state, I actually think even if there are new, cryptocurrency networks or blockchain-based solutions, they will coexist, and consumers will make choices about which one they prefer most. So, and in the meantime, I think there is definitely opportunity for us to figure out how we can collaborate with these new fintechs and bring these solutions to our customers.
Fantastic. Now, I do have one last question for you all. It's been a really great conversation here today. So what key message do you think our audience should take away from this session? Trent, I'm going to throw to you.
Okay, thank you. So I think, first of all, I think the key message for me is we've been clearly gathering large pools of data. And I think we're at kind of a stage of the journey now. We've probably gathered even more during the pandemic as we've really shifted towards digital. I think the key message for me now is how do we actually best utilize that data to actually really impact customer outcomes. And I think a lot of that comes back to what I said before. It's built on those foundations of trust. I think there's still a bit of fear out there about how data is used. So it's up to us, I think, to really continue to educate and build that trust. Because I've no doubt we can use those large pools of data for really clear, great, meaningful outcomes for customers. It's just really up to us to prove how that looks over time.
What about you, Malika? What key message would you like viewers today to take away from this session?
Yeah, I think we've touched on things like transparency, the consumer control of data, the data ownership, and choice. I think the other key thing is making sure that organizations really focus on cyber hygiene. So this is, in my mind, over and above what we've already said, this is going to be really important because we have to make sure that consumers have the confidence and trust in our organizations, and that they can be confident that the data will be protected to the highest standard. We're not going to read about another data breach, which means my identity has been compromised. So I think that's going to be of critical importance for all organizations to focus on.
And what key message would you like people to take away from today, John?
Oh, Ray, look, I think data is a journey. It's not something that's arrived today.
It's not a destination.
Or it's arriving tomorrow. It's a continual journey. And I think the technology capabilities are one thing, but I think it's also building that organisation in the business that can actually understand the technology, and because it's only going to end up happening faster for you, and identifying all the areas which you can homogenise and use it consistently. And don't leave that little server with the customer data sitting on it because you don't use it much anymore. Switch it off or put it into a greater data pool, because as disparate data is very hard to manage, and especially in the cyber age with all the vulnerabilities around old technologies.
Fantastic advice there, and that does bring us to the end of this session. A big thank you to our fantastic speakers today for sharing your insights and knowledge. Much appreciated. This was the third in a series of events called the HSBC Innovation Series that is continuing next month. Keep an eye on the event website to find a recording of today's event. Tim Ford, CEO of Treasury Wine Estate, is participating in the Bigger Trade discussion on April 20. As always, we welcome your feedback, and I'd kindly ask that you take the time to complete the online survey link that will be emailed to you very soon. In the meantime, from myself and HSBC, thank you and enjoy the rest of your day.